Donald Trump is due to preside over a ceremony on Thursday celebrating his proposal for a so-called Board of Peace. Now, this was originally part of his Gaza peace plan, meant to oversee the ceasefire and reconstruction in the Palestinian territory. He's now expanding the board's mission to broker solutions to global conflicts, and he's invited dozens of nations and leaders to pay billions to join.
U.S. President Donald Trump has long distrusted international institutions. Now he's announced his own.
We just created the Board of Peace, which I think is going to be amazing. I wish the United Nations could do more. I wish we didn't need a Board of Peace, but the United Nations, and you know, with all the wars I settled, the United Nations never helped me on one war.
The Board of Peace was originally supposed to be part of Phase 2 of Trump's Gaza peace plan. Along with an executive board and a team of Palestinian technocrats, the board would oversee difficult aspects of the peace plan, like disarming Hamas and beginning reconstruction in Gaza. But now it's become a work in progress with an expanding mission. It seems that Trump himself is the only one who really knows what's happening as the invitations go out. He is the lifetime chairman of the board. Even the White House webpage on the board still refers to the reconstruction of Gaza. But the U.S. has sent out a draft proposal to world leaders, saying it will embark on a bold new approach to resolving global conflict. There's a $1 billion fee to become a permanent member. The list of who's been invited to join contains an odd mix of world leaders. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already accepted. There's Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, Russia's Vladimir Putin, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, whose country is fighting a bloody war with Russia. Several countries have already signaled they won't take part or have said flat out no, including traditional U.S. allies France, Italy, and Norway. The United Nations has failed to stop or even mitigate multiple conflicts in recent years, including Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza. Time will tell if Trump's Board of Peace can do better, or if it becomes a billionaire's club where nations and leaders pay to play.
We're going to talk about this with DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Rosanas, who's here in the studio with me. Shani, great to have you here. We're going to have a look, first of all, at the countries that have been invited to Trump's Board of Peace so far. So we can see here on this map, in light blue, we're going to see the countries that have been invited by Trump to join the Board of Peace. In dark blue, we're seeing the 23 countries that have already accepted the invitation. So, Shani, let's talk about, first of all, the reason for this. Why is Trump setting up this Board of Peace?
Well, it started as an initiative to rebuild Gaza, and it was the idea was because of the mass devastation and the mass amounts of money needed to rebuild Gaza, that would need a very strong commitment and involvement from high-level leaders in the world. And I think Trump fell in love with the idea, and he sees himself as a president of peace. He also is very happy to weaken some of the international bodies that are already existing. Trump and the U.S. has withdrawn from more than 66 international bodies that are regulated by the UN, and not only. So for him, it became an all-encompassing idea of how he restructures the world and in his vision. And he is the almighty leader of this board. He has the veto on
lifelong leader.
Correct, even after his presidency is done, and so it's not a surprise that when we look at the participants, those who have agreed to come on, we see a lot of his allies like Lukashenko, like Orban, like Milei in Argentina. But then on the other hand, when you look at those who are either fall out refusing or sitting out, you see and their hesitance. Of course, you see a lot of the known power dynamics we're seeing happening in the world, mostly European countries who are very hesitant, because this is weakening the UN de facto. Because, for example, if countries bring 1 million to the table for Trump, where will they bring the money for the UN institutions, for example? And the UN has a very clear regulation. They have very clear, laws and bodies that have say for many different countries, first and foremost China and Russia, that have their veto in the Security Council, which they won't be having here. Why would they join, even though we know they have been invited? So, of course, Trump, I think, is very good and he's not just in rhetorics, he's also very perceptive in recognizing the weaknesses in the international existing organizations, but he is not too good in trying to fine-tune the solutions, either as a reform of the existing bodies or in the restructure of new bodies that will be still democratic and open and, constructive in their work.
Shani, let's talk about the structure of this board. Tell us how it would actually work on a practical level.
So what we're seeing is that Trump is taking a model that is very much similar to business model that we would see. This is a board, not by accident. So these are basically the key stakeholders in the game. They are the ones also footing the bill. They are giving the money. And underneath that, we will have the executive level of Trump's board, which is Marco Rubio, Kushner, and Witkoff, that are his closest aides, and also heads of states. And underneath that, there's going to be the executive board for Gaza. This will be headed by Moldanov. He is a Bulgarian, a very well-known diplomat that is also very, very well established in the region, in the Middle East, working for many years already from the United Arab Emirates. He is the one in charge of the technocrat committee, who is basically a gathering of 20 Palestinians who were vetted and approved by Israel to be running Gaza in the day after. And they would also be relying heavily on the international stabilization force, basically armed troops from international from different countries in the world. They would need to be taking over the security and demilitarization of Gaza and Hamas in order for the Technocrats Committee to actually be successful in rebuilding Gaza. But what we've been seeing, that this very, complex tower is actually being built from the first floor down instead of securing the basis, because now on the ground in Gaza, there's still very little know about the International Stabilization Force. Who is going to join it? When are they going to come in? Will it even, Israel is completely against it. It's not showing any signs of willing to withdraw, and Israel is still attacking in Gaza. The situation on the ground for Palestinians has changed very little, despite the very big ceremonies and the big names we're seeing here.
DW's Middle East analyst, Shani Rosanas. Shani, thank you.
Let's explore this with Heba Ali, who is a journalist and director of the UN Charter Reform Coalition. It's a group calling for change in the United Nations. Welcome to DW. This sounds like Donald Trump's attempt to either replace or circumvent the UN, which has become increasingly ineffective. As an organisation that's campaigned for change at the UN, is this something you welcome?
No. We certainly do welcome the desire for change at the UN, but not in this way. What Trump is doing is putting a nail in the coffin of the UN. This is circumventing the UN altogether. And yes, there is justification, or there is merit in his justification that the UN has been ineffective. But if we believe the UN is ineffective, and by the way, the UN is in part ineffective because of the actions of the United States, then let's fix the UN. But the answer is not putting responsibility for maintaining peace and security in the hands of one individual who sets up an exclusive club, names himself chairman for life, and charges a $1 billion membership fee, as you just heard. And I do believe that if this board is legitimized by world leaders, it sets a very, very dangerous precedent.
You say, if it's wrong, then let's fix it rather than go round it. But haven't we seen over the UN's lifetime that it is dominated by the Security Council? Members of the Security Council are now causing problems all over the world. Well, maybe the answer is to give it some competition. We've seen this president bully NATO's 30-odd members into increasing their military spending. Why wouldn't he be able to bully members of this board, or indeed the UN, into seeing the world a little differently and being a little more effective?
Well, again, I would say that the reason the UN isn't effective is because of certain members of its Security Council, and the United States is one of them. And so setting up an alternative body doesn't fix that problem. I think there are certainly challenges in trying to reform the UN, but we do have some windows of opportunity. And if we are to give President Trump credit, it is that the current situation has pushed, in particular, European leaders so far against the wall that they are now ready to be more ambitious and more courageous in trying to reform a system that we all know has not been fit for purpose for some time. It was created in 1945. It is out of date. It certainly needs an update. The good news is that there is a channel through which to do so. It's called Article 109. It's a review clause that was included in the founding document of the United Nations that allows for this set of rules to be updated, including the rules that give these 5 permanent members of the Security Council a veto power, which, as we know, has been at the heart of so much of the dysfunction. So I think the moment is now, and we really are in something of a 1945 moment where the old world order is crumbling, a new one is going to be built, and we need to be really intentional about how we rebuild it in a way that is democratic, that is inclusive, and that is fair. And Article 109 review process allows for us to renegotiate the rules of the game and set the United Nations up for the next 80 years, revitalize the institution. But we have to agree that a universal body where every country has a vote is essential. And if we start to privatize resolving peace and security issues, we're in a very dangerous world where the powerful do what they want and trample on the weak.
Which is where we are, many would argue, at the moment. And from what you've said, it sounds like you think that the biggest update, to use your words, that the UN needs now is the Security Council.
Actually, it's one of many. I think this is the most flagrant.
Well, let's look at the biggest, please. We only have a couple of minutes.
Yes, I think at the moment we can all agree that the peace and security system of the United Nations isn't working. It has not resolved challenges in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Venezuela, now the threats to annex Greenland. So absolutely, that needs reform. The question is, how do we do it? And there has been a process ongoing for decades now that hasn't led anywhere. Article 109 is an idea that is fresh and new and opens new doors and hopefully can inject some new wind. But the idea is really, what is the new global social contract that we need for this day and age? We're in a very different world, as I said, than 80 years ago. And so it's time to sit down and imagine what is the role of the UN in the 21st century and create a space for countries to get together and build that new vision that then addresses the challenges that President Trump says he's trying to do with this peace board.
Thank you for joining us, Heba Ali from the UN Charter Reform Coalition.
Thank you very much.